Welcome to Horizonte, a show that takes a look at current issues through a Hispanic lens. I'm your host, Catherine Anaya. Arizona's newest state Supreme Court justice is making history. Governor Katie Hobbs' appointment of Maria Elena Cruz makes Justice Cruz the first Latina and first Black Arizonan to sit on the state's highest court. And she brings with her bipartisan support along with more than 2 decades of experience. Justice Cruz received her law degree from the University of Arizona. She has served as a prosecutor, criminal defense attorney, a Superior Court judge in Yuma County, and an appeals court judge since 2017. She also teaches trial advocacy in Mexico. Please welcome Arizona Supreme Court Justice Maria Elena Cruz. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled.
Thank you. So tell me a little bit about what this has been like for you since your appointment. It's been a little crazy, I understand. Has it started to settle a little bit?
It feels like I jumped on a treadmill going full speed, and it's wonderful. There's a lot of work to be done, and so we're already doing it.
Well, thank you for making the time for us. When you think about the fact that you are making history, how significant is that? It's
important that people in our state see themselves represented in the institutions of the state, and especially in the judiciary. I am someone from a rural background, a rural community. I'm Latina, I'm Afro-Latina, and those are aspects of our communities that are important. And so how important is it to me to be sort of the representative? It is very. I have received so many positive messages. The Latino community is thrilled, the Black community is thrilled, the rural communities are also thrilled and celebrating. And so it matters, that representation matters. We'll talk more about the rural perspective.
You're reflecting people who for a long time have felt that they weren't represented, they weren't seen, they weren't heard. And these are communities that now feel like they're finally being represented. How does that make you feel taking on such a high honor like that?
It's an honor and also a responsibility to perform to the very best of my abilities. The law is the same for everyone, so the fact that I'm Latina is not going to cause me to rule in any different way from someone who is not. But it does engender confidence and trust from people, because if we have such a significant portion of our population that is of a certain community, of the Latino community, then it just begs the question, why is that not more prominently reflected on the Supreme Court? Now, there are 2 Latino members of our Supreme Court, so I will say that, but I am the first Latina, the first woman to serve in that capacity.
Yes. Let's talk about, you were mentioning Yuma and Yuma County. You've lived in Yuma County more than 30 years, and you're the only member of the Supreme Court from a rural county. Tell me about that deep connection to that part of the state and how that has influenced your approach to law.
Yes, I grew up in Yuma. I went from high school years forward. I have been and still am a member of that community. That's my residence. And it does impact my experience, and it impacts my approach to this new role that I am in now. And the reason for that is that the Supreme Court doesn't only decide appeals, they also have an administrative function for the judiciary statewide. And the resources are different in rural counties. We have to abide by the same laws and by the same rules of procedure as all the other counties, but sometimes we don't have the same resources that you have, let's say, here in Maricopa County. So it's important that when the Supreme Court is deciding on how to change the rules, how to amend the rules to better serve the public, that they take into account what is feasible for other communities like Yuma, like Apache, Cochise County, just all of the others that are not as large, because we have to do things sometimes a little bit differently to account for the fact that we don't have the resources. Now, also coming from Yuma, I had the opportunity to serve on the trial court. I was elected to the Yuma County Superior Court bench in 2008, and I served in many different areas. I had a criminal calendar, family calendar, civil. I've done probate cases, I've been a drug court judge for 5 years. And so those opportunities, those events gave me the opportunity to interact directly with the people who were being affected by my rulings. Having that gives me a different perspective while I'm on the Supreme Court. I don't have sort of an abstract understanding of how cases unfold, but a very real understanding. When you look at, for example, criminal cases, in criminal cases, judges have to look at, after a determination of guilt has been made, then a judge has to pass on to the sentencing phase, and they're looking at what is the history of this person, social, criminal, and otherwise, what has happened to the victim, what happened in this case, what are the thoughts of the family, a lot of different areas, and then make a decision about future behavior, right? In many cases, there's the opportunity to put the person on probation or send them to prison. And so the judge, within certain parameters, is making a decision as to where this person should go. And so those opportunities, and then being in a small community, seeing the impact of the decisions that you've made, because when you're living in a small community, believe me, you are accountable. You go to the grocery store and you see the people you have sentenced.
On a regular basis.
You go to your kid's school and you're there with other parents who have gone through the system. And so having that experience and feedback have been very instructive in now looking at cases from the Supreme Court perspective.
Well, it's been varied experience, which, is absolutely making a big difference in your role now. Chief Justice Timmer says that you bring to the court a rural perspective, like you talked about, of the Arizona Supreme Court's oversight of lower courts and regulation of the practice of law. That's extremely important. And was that influential in your decision to pursue law in the first place? Being from a rural community, understanding the nuances the way you do?
Yes, absolutely. I always knew that I wanted to do something, and in my 20-year-old self, I always said I wanted to do something that mattered, meaning something that had an impact in people's lives. And initially I understood that to mean possibly being a teacher, because teachers are the first people we learn from, and they absolutely have an impact on us. So I initially thought that might be my path, but I had a serious car accident that put me in touch with an attorney for the first time, and I saw, especially the lead up to having that meeting with the attorney, which I almost didn't have the opportunity to have an attorney represent me because we have so few, or did at that time, so few attorneys in our community. We are what many call a legal desert, and we see that throughout our state, places where there are not enough attorneys offering services. And so I remember feeling so grateful for the work that this attorney was doing for me, and that understanding that he was helping vindicate my rights. No matter how much other people felt for me or what they wanted to say, no one stood in the position he did to actually stand up and say, this person, this is what happened in the case and she needs to be compensated in this way. And so I thought, this is something that I can do and play a role that is necessary in my community. And so that's how I went to law school.
And so is that one of the reasons why you continue to teach? Because you will continue to teach in Mexico, right?
Well, if the opportunity continues to be there, then I am certainly happy to do that, yes.
And tell me about the connection that you have with the students. Like, we know obviously that you have an impact on them, but what kind of an impact do they have on you?
Well, it's an interesting thing when these students, as we're calling them, are really lawyers and judges. They're prosecutors, defense attorneys, and they carry very serious caseloads. What they're learning is trial advocacy, because the Republic of Mexico went through a change in their system where now they're having what they call oral trials. And these are trials, as you and I have known them for, forever in our country, right? Where a witness comes into court and takes an oath and is subject to direct and cross-examination. And so that is the skill. Those are the skills that they are learning. It's very interesting when you have these professionals learning skills and asking questions about why. Why does it work this way? And so it helps me look at our system from a different lens, and in having to answer these questions, understand the significance of every step. For example, not long ago, they always ask me questions about the jury system. They're fascinated by it. And not long ago, I had the question about why is it that we use members of the community to make determinations about cases in courts? And it became crystal clear to me that the jury system is an expression of our belief in self-governance. Mm-hmm. It's us, the American people, believing that we can decide. And so when there's a criminal case, the state, the government, goes in front of a group of citizens and asks them, presenting what evidence they have, and then ask them to find this person guilty of whatever crime it is. And so that's a realization that even though I'd been a prosecutor, a defense attorney, a judge, I'd never really thought about it in those terms. So those exchanges with people from the various courses in Mexico have been greatly enriching for me to learn more about our own system.
What's the feedback been from some of them to your appointment?
They're thrilled. They're very excited, even though they're not here in the country. They understand that the Latino population in the United States is significant, mm-hmm. and so they're very proud to see that we occupy all spaces.
I have to ask you, because I mentioned it in the intro, that you have bipartisan support. How does that happen?
Well, I think it's a result of me not being a very political person. I never have been very political, but I've, during my time in Yuma County, I tried to do what's right, to adhere to the law at every turn, not only when I was a prosecutor and a defense attorney, but especially when I started on the bench. And I think other people saw that and saw that I was willing to do what's right and to abide by the law. And then I've been encouraged along the way to apply for different positions. And so I was appointed to the Court of Appeals by a Republican governor, and now to the Supreme Court by Governor Hobbs.
So tell me, if you could describe it for me, what the reaction to your appointment has been, because not only is it bipartisan, but as we've already talked about, you're representing, some communities that have not felt very represented. So what has been the response across the board?
It has been overwhelmingly favorable, very, very positive. People who don't necessarily track the work of the courts are excited. I've had especially young people mm-hmm.
Approach
me in tears.
Gets me every time.
Yes, days after my appointment, I was down at the legislature to greet and observe, and there was a group of students who were there to advocate for their cause. And so the person who was accompanying me told them they were Mexican students, actually from Mexico, and the person accompanying me said, "This is the first Latina on the Supreme Court. You know, you have to meet her." And so they came over, and we talked for a little while, and then took pictures together. And I had one young lady who stood next to me, and she was trying to get herself ready for the photo, and she's doing this, and then she finally looks at me and says, "I'm sorry, you just don't know," and she just starts crying.
Oh, I love that.
And I said, I know. And that is a big part of why I decided to pursue this appointment. Mm-hmm. Because I want to do the work for our state broadly, but also because I want everyone to see themselves represented.
We appreciate you taking a break from your meetings and coming and joining us and sharing a little bit about yourself. Very impressive, and such an honor to have you here, so thank you.
Thank you.
And pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Continued success.
Thank you so much.
Thank
the work
you.
is just beginning.
It is indeed, and we appreciate it so much. That's our show. For Horizonte and Arizona PBS, I'm Catherine Anaya. Thanks so much for watching.